He came into this world as Brian Carson Williams, born on the 6th of April 1969 in Fresno, California. That's a matter of public record. And the man behind both of those names was never just a basketball player.
He was the son of a musician. He was a thinker, a reader, a wanderer who always seemed to be looking past whatever room he was standing in. That's the contradiction at the heart of this whole story. Because in 1997, according to the basketball archives, he won an NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls, one of the greatest teams the league has ever seen. He stood in the middle of basketball royalty, and somehow, even there, even on top of the world, he was restless inside it. This is a story that begins on a hardwood floor under bright arena lights, and it ends somewhere far darker, out on open water on a catamaran, with 3 people aboard and only one of them coming back.
But before he was a champion, before he was Bison Dele, he was a track kid in California whose body suddenly took him somewhere he never planned to go. To understand the restlessness, you have to start with the house he grew up in. This was a family where art ran through the bloodline. His father, Eugene Williams Jr., folks called him Gino, performed with the musical group The Platters, according to public documents and major media profiles. That's one of the legendary vocal groups in American music history. So young Brian didn't grow up around stiff routines and rigid expectations. He grew up around melody, around performance, around a man who made his living on stage chasing a feeling. That kind of household shapes a kid.
It teaches you to value expression over conformity, curiosity over comfort. And you can see it later in everything Brian became. A man who picked up instruments, who chased experiences, who never seemed content to just clock in and clock out. But here's the twist. Basketball wasn't even the plan. Originally, Brian was a track and field athlete. He was built for running, for motion, for the open field. Then, his body did what nobody ordered it to do. He hit a growth spurt, shot up in height, and suddenly, the track wasn't where the future was. The hardwood was calling. He landed at St. Monica Catholic High School in Santa Monica, and he made enough of a mark there that the school later retired his jersey. That's according to school records and sports media reports. Think about that. A kid who almost became a runner instead grew tall enough to leave his number hanging in the rafters of a basketball gym. That musical, curious mind would follow him everywhere, including into college, where he never quite seemed to settle in one place. By the time Brian Williams reached the college level, the pattern that would define his whole life was already starting to show. He was talented enough to play anywhere, but staying put? That was a different question entirely. He started his college career at Maryland, playing 1 season there, and then he was gone. According to the college basketball archives, he transferred out and headed west to the University of Arizona. Now, transfers happen all the time in college ball, but for Brian, this wasn't a one-off decision. It was an early signal, a clue about who he was. A young man with real ability who always seemed to be looking over the horizon for the next thing. At Arizona, he found a stage that fit him. He played 2 seasons there, according to the basketball archives, and that's where he really developed into a legitimate prospect. The frame filled out, the skills sharpened. Scouts started taking notice of a big man with size, mobility, and that unusual intelligence that didn't always show up on a stat sheet. You could already see the 2 sides of him pulling against each other. On one hand, the raw physical gifts that make NBA front offices fall in love. On the other hand, a personality that didn't bend easily to a system. A man who would always be talented, but always be searching. By 1991, the league was watching, and one franchise was about to spend a lottery pick on him. When your name gets called in the lottery, the weight lands on your shoulders the same night. There's no easing into it. You're not just a prospect anymore. You're an investment, a piece of a franchise's future, and everybody's watching to see if you'll pay off. In the 1991 NBA Draft, the Orlando Magic selected Brian Williams 10th overall. That's straight from the basketball archives. A lottery pick, top 10. That kind of selection comes with real expectations attached. Orlando wasn't grabbing him in the second round and hoping for the best. They were betting on him to become a building block. He played in Orlando from 1991 to 1993, according to the basketball archives, landing right in the middle of a young, developing franchise, still trying to figure out its identity. On paper, it should have been a clean fit, a talented big man arriving on a team hungry to grow up fast. But this is where you start to see the cracks between what the team wanted and who Brian actually was. The franchise had a vision, a plan, a role, a mold they wanted to pour him into. And Brian's personality didn't fully line up with that mold. The same independent streak that pushed him out of Maryland, the same curious, restless spirit that came from a musician's home, it didn't disappear just because there was now an NBA paycheck involved. Talent alone has never been enough to keep a player in one place. Fit matters. Chemistry matters.
And the early signs were already there that Orlando and Brian weren't going to be a long marriage. Within 2 years, he was gone from Orlando, the first move in a career that would bounce him across 5 teams. When a player leaves his first team after just 2 seasons, the league starts to whisper. Is he the problem? Is the fit wrong? Or is he just a man who needs the right room to breathe in? With Brian Williams, the honest answer was probably all 3 at once. After Orlando, he landed in Denver, suiting up for the Nuggets from 1993 to 1995, according to league record keeping. 2 more years, another fresh start, another roster trying to figure out exactly what they had in him.
And then he was on the move again, this time heading to the West Coast to play for the Los Angeles Clippers from 1995 into 1996. Now you'd think all this bouncing around would be a red flag, and in some ways it was. But here's the thing about Brian. Teams kept giving him chances for one simple reason. The man could play. The talent was real. Every front office that took a shot on him believed they'd be the one to finally unlock it. And in Los Angeles, for a stretch, they did. With the Clippers in that 1995 to 96 season, he finally got the runway he'd been missing. He averaged 15.8 points per game across 65 starts, and those are the documented numbers.
That wasn't a backup filling minutes. That was a legitimate NBA starter, a centerpiece, a big man you could build around. For the first time, the gifts and the opportunity lined up at the same moment. For a player who'd been treated like a question mark his whole career, this was the answer. He'd shown the league he could carry real weight, night after night, as a starter who mattered. Just as he proved he could start in this league, a contract fight froze him out, and he nearly missed an entire season. This is one of the strangest chapters in his whole career, and it tells you everything about the man underneath the jersey. He was coming off the best stretch of basketball he'd ever played. 15.8 points a night as a starter, a breakout, the kind of season that usually leads to a fat new deal and a long-term home. Instead, it led to silence. According to basketball record keeping and major sports media reports, a contract dispute left Brian without a team heading into the 1996 to 97 season. Think about how rare that is. A productive starting big man, fresh off proving exactly what he could do, and somehow he couldn't land a roster spot when the season tipped off. So he sat. He sat out most of that entire year,
Now, you have to ask the hard question here. Was this just bad luck, bad timing in a complicated market? Or was it something deeper? A quiet sign that the game simply didn't grip him the way it gripped other men. Because most players in that situation would have been desperate, calling every agent, taking any offer to get back on the floor. The fear of missing a season would eat them alive. Brian didn't seem to burn that way. The same independent streak that moved him from school to school, from team to team, was showing up again. He wasn't chasing the league with both hands. He was letting it come to him, or not come at all. And in the middle of all that uncertainty, with most of a season already gone, the phone finally rang. But it wasn't just any team calling.
Then, with the regular season almost over, the most famous team in the world made a phone call. Picture sitting at home for most of a season, your career hanging in limbo, and then the Chicago Bulls call your number. Not a rebuilding club, not a long shot. The Bulls, in the middle of one of the greatest dynasties professional basketball has ever produced. According to league record keeping, Chicago signed Brian Williams just 9 games before the end of the 1996-97 regular season. 9 games. He showed up at the tail end of a championship machine that was already rolling downhill toward another title. He wasn't there to be the star. He was there to be a piece, a big, capable body off the bench who could give them quality minutes when it mattered most. And he delivered. When the playoffs came, he appeared in 19 postseason games as an important backup big man, helping anchor a front court rotation on a team chasing history. That spring, the Bulls won the championship, the 5th banner of that legendary era. Just like that, the restless wanderer, the man who'd been frozen out of the league months earlier, was a champion. But sit with the irony of it for a second. He didn't grind through a full season to earn that ring. He didn't carry the franchise on his back. He walked in near the finish line, did his job, and walked out with a title that men chase their entire lives and never touch. For most players, that would be the defining moment, the thing they'd talk about forever. For Brian, it almost seemed to land differently. He got to the top of the mountain through a side door, and once he was there, he got the sense it didn't fill him up the way everyone assumed it would. A title should have been the beginning of something. Instead, it became one of the last things tying him to the game at all. Fresh off a championship, Brian found his next home in Detroit, suiting up for the Pistons from 1997 through 1999. And here's where the story gets genuinely fascinating, because on paper, this should have been the proudest chapter of his entire career. The numbers prove it. In the 1997-98 season, he posted the best stat line of his life: 16.2 points and 8.9 rebounds per game across 78 starts. That's a full, healthy season as a frontline starter, putting up career highs in both scoring and rebounding. After all those years of bouncing around, of being a question mark, of getting frozen out, he had finally arrived as a steady, productive force, and Detroit paid him like it. By the end of his run there, he had become the Pistons' highest-paid player, according to major sports media reports. So here's a man at his professional peak, best numbers of his life, top of the payroll, a championship ring in his pocket. Everything the league tells you to want, he had it all sitting right there in his hands. And yet, this is the contradiction that defines him. The better he got at the job, the less the job seemed to hold him. The reports from that time point to a man growing more detached, not more invested. The points went up, the rebounds went up, the money went up. But the hunger that drives most athletes to squeeze every last drop out of their careers, that seemed to be draining out of him by the day. Most players spend their whole lives trying to reach the exact spot Brian was standing in. He reached it.
and started looking for the exit. At just 30 years old, sitting on tens of millions of guaranteed dollars, he was about to do something almost no athlete ever does. Athletes don't quit at their peak. That's the unwritten rule of professional sports. You ride it until your body gives out, until the team cuts you loose, until somebody pries the jersey off your back. You squeeze every last paycheck out of it because you've worked your whole life for this, and the money won't come this easy ever again. Bison Dele tore that rule up.
Before the 1999 to 2000 season, at just 30 years old, he walked away from the NBA. Not because of injury, not because anybody pushed him out. He simply decided he was done. And here's the part that left people shaking their heads for years afterward. According to public documents and major sports media reports, he walked away from roughly $36.5 million, 5 remaining years on his contract, rather than accept a trade he didn't want. Let that number settle for a moment. $36 million. Guaranteed. Money already promised to him, sitting right there waiting to be collected. Most men would crawl through broken glass for a fraction of that. He looked at it, and he let it go. Why? The honest answer is the one a lot of folks couldn't accept. It has been theorized and noted across multiple sources that Bison was never especially passionate about basketball in the first place. He was good at it, gifted at it even, but it didn't own his heart. And by this point, he had enough money to live whatever life he wanted. So the math for him was simple. Why keep doing something that didn't move you just to add more zeros to an account that was already full? That's a kind of freedom most people never get to taste. He didn't retire to relax. He retired to disappear into a life of music, flying, and the open sea. Even his name was about to change. In 1998, while still in the league, Brian Carson Williams legally became Bison Dele. That's a matter of public record. It wasn't a stage name or a marketing gimmick. He chose it to honor his Cherokee and African ancestry, to claim an identity that felt truer to who he believed he was. The man was reinventing himself from the inside out, shedding the name he was born with the way he'd later shed the career he was famous for. And once basketball was behind him, the real Bison came out into the open. This was a man of restless appetites. He played saxophone, violin, and trumpet, that musician's blood from his father finally given room to breathe. He earned a pilot's license, taking to the sky on his own terms. And he chased adventure the way other former players chase broadcasting deals and endorsement checks. According to major media reports and public documents, he traveled the world without a leash. He went to Lebanon. He drifted through the Mediterranean. He pushed out into the Australian outback. He wasn't sightseeing from a tour bus. He was living rough, going where the wind took him, collecting experiences instead of trophies. Then came the sea. He learned to sail, and he bought himself a catamaran. For a man who'd spent his whole adult life being told where to be and what to do, the open ocean must have felt like the purest freedom he'd ever known. No schedule. No coach. No franchise. Just water in every direction and a horizon that never stopped moving. It was the life he traded a fortune to find, and in the summer of 2002, that catamaran set sail from Tahiti with 4 people aboard, and the story stopped being about basketball entirely. This is where the story crosses over from a sports curiosity into something far colder. On the 6th of July, 2002, Bison Dele set sail from Tahiti aboard his catamaran, the Hakuna Matata, a slightly misspelled rendering of that famous Swahili phrase that translates to "no worries," a boat named for a carefree life. Remember that, because the irony of it is hard to shake. There were 4 people on that vessel. Bison himself his girlfriend, Serena Carlin, the skipper hired to help run the boat, a man named Bertrand Saldo, and the fourth passenger, the one this whole tragedy would eventually circle back to, was his own brother, Miles DeBoard, born Kevin Williams. Two brothers, a girlfriend, and a captain, out on the open Pacific. On the surface, it sounds like a dream trip, but there were tensions on that boat that the calm blue water couldn't hide. And out there, hundreds of miles from anyone, those tensions had nowhere to go. According to investigative and media reports, the last satellite phone call from the boat was made on the 8th of July, 2002, 2 days after they left Tahiti. After that call, the line went quiet.
And here's the chilling detail that investigators would later fixate on. After that date, only one of the 4 people aboard was ever seen or heard from again. 3 voices went silent on the open water. One did not. 12 days later, the catamaran came back to Tahiti with only the brother aboard. On the 20th of July, 2002, the Hakuna Matata returned to Tahiti, but the boat that came back was not the same boat that had left, and the man steering it was alone. Miles DeBoard docked that catamaran by himself, according to investigative and media reports, with no sign of his brother, no sign of Serena Carlin, and no sign of the skipper, Bertrand Saldo. 3 people had vanished somewhere out on that water, and the only explanation available was coming from the one man left standing. Then came the red flags, one after another, each one worse than the last. The boat itself told a disturbing story. It had been re-registered in Tahiti under a different name, according to public records and major media reports, as if someone wanted to erase what it had been. The original nameplate had been removed. And most alarming of all, investigators would later note what appeared to be bullet holes that had been patched over. Think about that picture. A pleasure boat named for a worry-free life, returning to port with 3 people missing, a brand new identity, its name stripped off, and patched over damage where rounds may have struck the hull,